All right, law and licensing. We have got this scheduled for 40 minutes. We are currently 1 hour behind. So, deep breath and let's plunge. Hey, I'm the one that ran the meeting that lasted till 2 a.m., right? So,
I tried.
pot, kettle, I'm the pot, I'm the kettle, whatever. But let's do this. I want to put out a reminder. We want to be thorough. We also want to be efficient. We do have the capacity under our bylaws, if we need to kind of make things go quicker. So this is not a threat. It's just a request to work together so we don't have to modify the rules. But Robert's rules shall constitute the rules of parliamentary procedure, except were deemed to be unnecessary, impractical, or inefficient by the member chairing the meeting. So we do have the capacity, and this has been done in the past, to limit it to one comment per person, to limit the number of comments, to get to a vote. So let's just work together on this, try to crank through this, make sure we've already done our homework, we've asked questions that were, and I want to, just because I'm now just swinging into this chair, just thank staff for setting up opportunities to discuss. We had a good one regarding a contract that's coming up later. We had a good one on voted local levies. So our staff's really trying hard to make sure that we have the opportunity to prepare, and let's move forward with things that we can now clarify to bring to a vote, and hopefully the homework's been mostly done, and we can now exchange views and bring it to a vote. So if we do have to get there, I'll limit it to one comment and cut it short and move on to a vote. We got 40 minutes. I think we can go a little bit beyond that, but let's try to keep this to 40, 45. So with that little scare tactic, let's turn it to Chair Hymas and crank away. Thank you, sir. As always, you guys got the heavy lift. We've got, I think, 14 items. Some of those are information, but
Thank you.
let's crank. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair Moss. Let's start on agenda item 4.2. This is a research data sharing agreement with the University of Virginia. The committee moves that the board approve the research data sharing agreement with researchers at the University of Virginia.
Any discussion? If not, please vote. Oh, sorry. Member Bogus. Hey, could you, well, I'll look for you here. Could you put that mic just up until it's called? I swear some of these hide behind the computer screens, and then we, yours in particular, I couldn't see it when you did it. Anyway, we're trying.
You're fine. You're fine. So, is this Director Chalice? Cap Chalice?
Sure, yes. Thank you, Director Chalice. And we're not going to ask you to speak unless there's a question. Hopefully, these are things that we've had an opportunity to have board members reach out to you. I don't know if they did, but if there's cleanup matters, go ahead, Member Bogus.
So I have just a couple questions, and I did reach out to you on like 3 issues. This one came at about midnight last night. So, who legally possesses the data that we're giving to the University of Virginia? Isn't it? Who's the legal holder of that data? Oh,
okay.
I apologize. I thought you were waiting for the question again.
No, I'm sorry.
We got to, let's see here. Public one, you got it?
Yeah. Chair, may I respond to
Yes,
that
please.
question?
Thank you.
So, Katie Chalice, Director of Privacy. I think possessing the data, I think you could argue, are you asking if possessing or owning?
Well, I think individual data is owned by the individual, but as it's collected in a state system, who's the possessor, owner? I mean, technically, we're giving away other people's stuff. So I'm wondering, who's accountable once we say, here you go, have everybody's information? Who's accountable then?
So
Are
it's-
we
it's-
accountable if this
By
data is
ownership,
misused?
you're asking about who's accountable for maintaining it and keeping it private?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks. That's a helpful clarification. So obviously we have the discretion and the responsibility to be good stewards of the data ultimately. Within the legal bounds that we're permitted to share, then we can, and the legal bounds that would permit us to share with these researchers is called the studies exception in FERPA. And then their expectation is to maintain the data to the same level or higher than we would in terms of privacy and security. I'll also mention that they're not receiving personally identifiable information for this study, so it's de-identified data.
Okay, and then
Follow up, Member Bogus?
I just have a quick follow-up.
Sure.
So you mentioned the third-party language, and I assume you're referring to 53E9309, and I can email that to you. This really did come at like midnight. I was up till like 3 o'clock in the morning. So under that code, it says that a third party can legally sell through mergers and acquisitions. So is there anything on the horizon that this research entity, which appears to me to be like a subcontractor of the university, is going to be merged or sold or put off to another university and we have to revisit this? I'm just wondering if there's anything on the horizon that you see in that area.
Chair, may I respond?
Yes, please.
So the code that you're referring to, Member Bogus, that refers to someone that, like USBE or an LEA would contract with to provide a service. This is separate from that. So selling the data would be absolutely not permissible from the researchers. The selling of data that might take place according to the code that you're referring to would be only allowable if a company was acquired by another company. But because this is not a company and it's not shared under that provision, then that wouldn't apply or be permitted.
I just have one final follow-up.
Last one.
Okay.
Okay.
So then, if it's not a company, how is it organized? Like a research group, and what's the legal name for that? Like how? I don't know if that even makes sense. It doesn't really make sense in my head. If it's not a company or it's not an entity, what is it?
Oh, I would say, Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
I would say it is definitely an entity, but it's not a company. So because they're researchers at a public education institution, the provision or the legal exception that allows us to share with them is the studies exception under FERPA, assuming they meet certain requirements. But yeah, I would call them an entity, not a company, because they're a university.
So Director Chalice, in our contracts with them, are they precluded from selling this?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So that's part of the protection that goes into the entity or subdivision of the entity if it's a research facility within a university. Okay. Any other comments or questions? If not, the motion is that the boards approve the research data sharing agreement with researchers at the University of Virginia. All in favor, raise your hands. Should I do it?
And then opposed.
And opposed.
Okay, read off the
3 opposed, Green, Bogus, and Klein opposed. Did I get that right? Okay, back to you, member, or Chair Hymas. Oh, let's see. Come on.
Thank you. On to agenda item 4.3, R277-927, Teacher and Student Success. This is an amendment. The committee moves that the board approve R277-927, Teacher and Student Success, Draft 1 on second and final reading.
Okay, any discussion of that motion? Member Bogus? Well, let's see. I have Bogus and Klein in order, that order, so let's see if I got
So
you.
my
Yeah?
query may be for Director Rasmussen. And it's short, or maybe Superintendent Stallings, I don't know.
Let's get the question out, Member Bogus, and then see if we have a, we're shifting a little bit. There's been discussion between staff members about sort of just giving us a wait to see if they need to come up. So why don't you throw it out and then we'll see who's here.
Okay, so in the sections, lines 4 through 25, I don't see the code that requires this, except maybe in line 14. And, okay, is that okay, that's all I have then.
All right.
I think it might be incorrectly hyperlinked.
Okay, and I think, Member Bogus, that's a great point that could be done offline, just so that we can make sure that the links are working and everybody has access to it, but we can stay in our allotted time frame. If I see, Member Klein, I think, yes, please.
And so, well, I agree with you, and we send lots and lots of emails back and forth, right? But at 3 a.m., it's not really prudent to send an email, and I think it's an unrealistic expectation of our staff to expect them to respond to 3 a.m. emails. I just think it's unrealistic. I think that they do good work and they work hard, but I also think, you know, since we're debating this, I think denying the public access to the questions that we genuinely have and that they may have also is a violation of Utah code. I think that democracy is messy, but the public debate is important, and to stifle public debate, I think it's a breach of the public trust. And so that's my only thought on that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And it's our choice whether the idea comes to us at 3 a.m. I was up, so you could have emailed me. I was knee deep at 3 a.m. But I guess my point is, you know, we as board members, we're trying to get this done earlier. And so if we have questions, and certainly every comment we have is not necessarily one the public has, but we have debate, but we got to keep it moving. We got to make it efficient. And so I think that's a great topic to maybe send to Director Rasmussen. Member Klein.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm still, did I get it? There we go.
I would just like to make a motion, lines 155 and 157 have percentage rates for determining the threshold points that designate a school as succeeding. Those, I don't know why, have been lowered from the old numbers, which were 55% and 57% for elementary and secondary. And so I would move to replace the old higher percentage rates in that spot. So on line 155, I would change, strike out 43.5% and replace it with 55%. And line 157, strike 46% with 57%.
Okay, is there a second?
I don't know.
There's a second. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I was flabbergasted actually looking to see that we are lowering, like very plainly lowering the bar as far as what we are designating as successful school performance. And we should be raising the bar, not lowering the bar. So I'm just simply asking that it go back to the previous percentage rate, which hopefully we can do better than, but certainly I am not okay with lowering the bar.
Further discussion of that motion? Any others? If not, Chair Hymas or Vice Chair?
I guess I'm just not, this has to do with the points. This isn't the grading scale, so I'm trying to understand the dynamics here. This is different than just competency, right? And this has to do with their points that are collected from other areas. So I'm not sure the changing about, I don't know what that impact is. So I wouldn't be able to vote for it without knowing, you know, how this impacts the overarching system and because those points are gathered from many different things, not just from accountability as far as, am I accurate in saying that? Who could confirm that?
so
I
if
don't
I
know if
could-
Darren's here.
Yeah, maybe I could piggyback. I think the purpose of this statistic is to determine whether their student success plan can be approved, correct? It's not turnaround, it's not about getting funding. It is when they come up with their student success plan, if they're below this, then there might have to be a revisiting of that plan. Is that basically right? Okay, so this is sort of allowing the school to pass a plan. And that's about it, right? That's the only purpose of the difference of it's school performance that's being measured. I just wanted to clarify the significance of that measurement of performance. It is to decide whether that student's success
Nelson.
plan can be approved. Did you want to add more to that, or is that kind of?
Okay.
Okay, so that's the purpose, because the question is to what, you know, what are we lowering the bar for, right? It's whether their student success plan will be approved. Right.
Threshold points that do-
And it references 53G 71306, and if you look that up, it talks about school improvement and approving the success plan or modifying it. If they don't hit it, then the LEA has to work with the school's principal to modify the student success plan. So that's the school success plan. All right, any other comments, questions to that? So there's an amendment on the floor. It's been seconded. And the motion to amend is that the board replace the percentages on line 155 from 43.5 with 55%, and on line 157, 46% with 57%. All in favor, please raise your hand. Oh, sorry, I'm not. 3 in favor, all opposed. 12, unless we're missing somebody. 12-3. Oh, we are missing Molly. 11-2-3 then, right? Okay. All right, so back to the underlying main motion, which is that the board approve R277-927, Teacher and Student Success Draft 1 on second and final reading. Seeing no other lights, oh, as amended, excuse me. All in favor, raise of hands.
It didn't get amended.
It didn't get amended. Okay, I took up your, yep, as, all right, let me rephrase that. As not amended, sorry. Sometimes I overlook the amendment.
Sir, we're gonna go round today.
Yeah, bring it on. Help me out there. Help me out there. You're right. This is not amended. So the motion is that the board approve R277-927, Teacher and Student Success Draft 1 on second and final reading. All in favor, show of hands. All opposed? Only 2 opposed? Or, sorry, raise them high if you're opposed. Member Green, Member Klein opposed. So 13-2. All right, back to Chair Hymas.
Thank you. Just, I will turn it off after each one, just because there's only X amount of people, just a heads up. But we are moving to agenda item 4.4, R277-419, pupil accounting. The committee moves that the board approve R277-419, pupil accounting draft 1 on second and final reading.
Member Klein, discussion of that motion?
I have a motion.
Substitute or a motion to amend?
Motion to amend.
Okay.
So, well, I guess it's just an amendment to the rule is what I'm doing, so.
Okay, that's in order.
And I apologize, I don't have it right in front of me. I forgot to write down the line number, but where it says educational services, I would move to strike educational services and replace it with academic instructional hours.
So it's 45. All right.
So I would need to strike the definition as well for educational services. So strike the definition of educational services, and then in the body of the text. Yes. So anywhere it says educational services, replace with academic instruction. If it makes sense, hours. I just haven't looked at each of the spots, but I think academic instruction to replace educational services.
Is there a second? Yes. Member Bogus, seconds. Discussion to your motion, Member Klein.
Educational services is not in the code. Instructional hours is, and we need to get, in my opinion, back to instructional or academic instruction in the schools, whereas educational services is very broad and almost anything could be put in, that could apply to almost anything way beyond academic instruction into areas that I don't believe are the proper role of schools, and is actually that broad definition or ambiguous definition of educational services is replacing crucial instruction time under the guise of educating our students, because it covers behavioral, mental health, it covers MTSS and PBIS and all sorts of services that are being brought in from outside of schools. And I think we need to focus back in on academic instruction and stick with the language that's in code instead of creating this super broad term that anything could fit under.
Okay, further discussion. Member, let's see, Bogus and then Wood.
Thank you, sir. May I query the maker of the motion? Member Klein, did you intend to strike lines 45 through 52? Or did you intend to strike lines 45 through 48? I just want to have clarity because I intend to amend it based on your answer.
So it would be 45, just that whole section.
So your intention with this motion is to strike line 45 through 52? And then change the language throughout the world to academic instruction? Yes, what Carol said. No, 51, yes. Thank you, Carol. Member Lear. Okay, with that, as long as what is on the board is acceptable to you, I have no further comment. Thank you.
Okay. That's a friendly without objection. Okay, Vice Chair Earl.
Yeah, it seems like this change would make a big impact to this rule in general. If that's the case, then if this passes, it probably needs to go back to committee because this is a pretty big shift and a change. So just, I think people might want to just keep that in mind. If we want to move this, which is fine, then we probably need to take it back to committee if it passes, just because of the impact, so.
Okay, seeing no lights, let's vote. The motion is to amend that the board delete the definition of educational services, lines 45 to 51, and replace the term educational services with academic instruction throughout the rule. Just a quick point of order. We've been doing, hand votes. Do you want roll calls with our new system? It is faster, yeah. So if we're good with that, I'll just keep going. Yeah, all right. We're more of a logistical question, but if we're good with that, great. Okay, all in favor of the motion to amend, please raise your hands. 3, Member Bogus, Member Klein, Member Green, all opposed by show of hands. 11 opposed, Member or Vice Chair Hart not present. So that brings us back to the underlying motion, which is that the where'd I go? Board approves R277-419 Pupil Accounting Draft 1 on second and final reading. Member Klein.
I move that the board allow Rule R277-419 to sunset.
That would be, I assume, in the nature of a substitute motion, correct? Okay. All right, so that's in order. Does it have a second? Hearing no second. Well, we have to have a second to have a question, so if they're seconded, okay. It's been seconded. Back to you, Member Klein, unless you want us to move over to Member Bogus to address her question to you.
I'm sorry, I didn't have anything more to say.
Okay, back to you, Member Bogus.
Sorry.
Oh,
Thank you, sir. So my query would be based on lines 18 and 20. This rule is required by code. So allowing it to sunset would then necessitate a policy request in another part of the agenda. Would that be accurate?
Right, but there are requirements to have something in place.
I'm not sure.
So
We
am I-
could defer to Deputy Stallings on that one if you'd like. I mean, it's not really proposing a policy, it's a sunsetting of a policy, right? What do you say?
Is that language in here that I missed?
Deputy Stallings, yes, please.
Thank you.
There we go.
To clarify, yes, by code, the State Board of Education is required to establish the minimum days and hours, if applicable, for LEAs to conduct school. I'll just put it that way because we've talked about other definitions. The reason why the last 3 years, we've put a sunset at the bottom of this rule is just to trigger that a new version of the rule has to be put in place. And so if we sunset, or if you allow this to sunset, we would be out of compliance with the law. But practically, the reason the sunset is at the bottom of the rule was to state that the board at some point before the 24-25 school year needs to come up with a different version of the rule. And I think that's been because prior boards have been uncomfortable leaving the 990 hours out in perpetuity. So we've been passing the rule year by year for 3 years now. And the presentation that was provided in Law and Licensing explained that the staff recommendation is to just use the version that we've been, essentially the standards we've been using for the last 3 years, allow those to go on ongoing from now on, if that makes sense. So if you were to, there's a lot in this rule that governs distribution of formulas, how we account for students, how we collect membership, etc. If the board does not want to have this rule anymore, then I agree with Board Member Bogus that we would probably need to let the legislature know that we do not want to have this rulemaking authority any longer, and that the legislature would need to establish these parameters in Utah code, if that makes sense. But if you just want to defer action on this rule today, we could. But sometime before the beginning of the 24-25 school year, we would need to establish another version of this rule. And practically speaking, much of what is in this rule impacts LEA's scheduling. So districts and charters begin passing their schedules for the coming school year in December. And that is why we were asked actually by the board to bring this rule forward in August to committee, which we did last month, so that we aren't, what we've been doing in the past is bringing this rule to the board in December, because LEAs need to know what these requirements are going to be so they can set their school calendars. So my recommendation would be, if the board no longer wants to have this rulemaking authority, that you do establish something for the 24-25 school year so that calendars can be sent, parents and community members and teachers can know in December or January what that school year calendar is going to be. And if you wanted the legislature to then do this instead of us, give the legislature time to do that for the 25-26 school year.
And thank you, Deputy Stallings. And if the rule is not sunsetted, then I take it this would come up for review and revision at some point. Is that the intent as it's currently constituted, is that this does need to come back before 24-25?
This rule needs to be amended before the beginning of the 24-25 school year legally. Practically speaking, if we're going to give notice to LEAs on what their schedules should be, the board should take action before December. So something has to happen before June 30th of 2024, because that right now legally this rule is going to go away. It will not have effect beginning July 1, 2024. Practically speaking, if we want to give LEAs notice of what they need to have in place for their school year schedules, we should take action before December of this year.
And is that already something the staff have in the works, or that the board would need to initiate beyond what we're looking at here? Or is this constitute the change that, all the change that would be needed before, fall?
The draft one that was approved by the committee is the action. And just as a reminder, and I don't want to go through the whole PowerPoint, but this discussion began last year in December, and the board directed staff to get a work group together. We had 30 staff members work on this. We did a survey that had around 2,000 responses from different members of the, mostly education leaders, for their feedback on whether specifically the 990 hours should be reinstated or not. There was a PowerPoint that kind of explained the staff recommendation. I'm not saying you have to take the staff recommendation, but this is the action that we helped support, bring to the board, that the idea was to try and get it done sooner in September based on feedback from many, instead of waiting until December. But absolutely, if the board is not ready to pass this rule today, it could be deferred back to committee or however you'd like, or back to the full board in a subsequent month.
thank you. Further discussion from that comment? Back to member, well, hang on, let's see here. We do have Bogus, Straight, and Norton. If you can make it quick, because we have two. Actually, let me do that first. I'm sorry. I'm going to go to the others that haven't asked questions first. Straight, Norton, Davis, and then back to Bogus.
My question was probably answered. I did see that there were two letters. Were those solicited or unsolicited, Chair? Do you know?
Not sure.
Well, could you direct that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was to me. Member Deputy Stallings.
I meant to pass it to you.
Fair enough. Gotcha. Sorry.
So board members may remember,
I'm trying to.
So previously, the letters were requested by the board and staff, and this is how the conversation went. In August, Law and Licensing Committee, staff shared that we had 3 LEAs, and I believe there are 3, 1 charter school and 2 districts, who wrote in letters of support. But in August, staff explained to the committee that those 3 LEAs were planning to come here today to speak in favor of this draft 1 as is, and to help articulate kind of the work of the work group and the surveys and all of that about their support for draft 1. In lieu of having them come and provide presentations and to save the board's time, it was recommended. There was a decision made by board leadership and staff, and actually it was something that board member Lear articulated during the committee meeting, that instead of having them come and present to the board today, that they provide a written letter of support. So those letters of support were solicited in lieu of doing a presentation.
But in addition then, Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
So in addition, we have results of 2,000 respondents, mostly educational leaders, in regards to this as well. Did I understand that correctly?
Deputy Stallings?
Yes.
Okay. Do we know what page those results are on? I didn't see those results. They're probably here, but
Anybody have that?
Help me.
We can come back to that if we need to.
Okay,
If that's
so
all right. We can see,
It's
I-
under stakeholder feedback is the summary. It's like a 2-page summary. Sorry, it's stated that the backup is called stakeholder feedback, and in there is just a summary of the survey.
oh, okay.
And I apologize, I said 2,000, it was 400. I have been supporting a lot of these items today, so I get mixed up on which item is which. But if you look at the 2-page summary, it says that 400 Utah education stakeholders, including district and charter school leadership, business administrators, school leadership, student services, et cetera, answered a survey related to the removal of the 990 hours requirement and minimum school day definition. And if you look at those 2 pages, you can see the summary of the result of the survey.
Do you know what page that's on in our packet, or? It's a slide? Oh, I did see that. Oh, it's on the agenda. Okay, I was looking in the wrong place. Okay.
Board member Straight, it is showing on the screen now. It is in backup on Civic Clerk.
all right, Member Norton?
Thank you. I'm just asking to have it clarified, what impact would not passing this or not allowing this to continue on be on those districts that have received a special, what's the word?
A waiver?
Waiver for their schedule?
That for Deputy Stallings? Thank you.
Thank you. So in general, all of 419 applies to all 160 LEAs. We have about 23 schools out of about 1,100 schools that currently have received a waiver from a certain aspect of the board rule related to the 180 days, not the 990. And if you were to sunset this rule, it would impact all 1,100. So the 23 LEAs with waivers, they currently do adhere to the 990 hours, because generally the 180 days becomes somewhere between 155 and 165 days. So the 990 is like a separate If you're going to get a waiver from the 180, then you need to adhere to the 990. And that's what's included in those waivers that we currently have, or those agreements. So as to the impact of if we sunset 419, it would impact those 23 schools in the same way the other 1,100, because there's so much more, as you saw. It's like a 20-page rule that would impact all 1,100 schools, not just those 23.
Thank you. On to Member Davis. Oh, off? Okay, back to Member Bogus. Let's see. There we go.
Thank you, sir. Can we go back to the motion? So, as I presently read it, I would speak against the motion. I don't think gifting this authority to the legislature is our best choice. I think we're the most suitable to do the job. And it was just confirmed that the only changes are the removal of the lines 631 and 632. So I would just speak against the motion to substitute. I think we need to keep this in our hands. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further lights, members, let's vote. The motion then is a substitute motion that the board allow R277-419 to sunset. All in favor, raise your hands. All for the substitute. Okay, one in favor, any opposed? 13-1 against. Brings us back to the underlying motion, which is that the board approves R277-419 pupil accounting draft 1 on second and final reading. Member Klein to that motion? Oh. Come on. Come on. I think that got you. Yeah.
So I would make a substitute motion that it gets sent back to committee to have, to flesh out more of these details. I have serious concerns about this rule in the fact that it's based on code that talks about instructional hours, and it doesn't say that. It just says in our rule, it says educational services, which is different than instructional hours, and we are not in alignment with the code, and it needs reworking. So I would move to send it back to committee to fit in academic instruction somewhere, or at least to define what all the services are that fall under educational services. I know there's a definition in here, but it's very broad. I would like, and maybe staff, this is something staff could send to all of us, but a fleshed out list of all educational services that fall under that, so that we know exactly what we're talking about and what is taking up those 990 hours and the 180 days versus actual instruction time.
Okay, further discussion to that motion? Oh, we do need a second. Did we not see a second? Member Green seconds. Okay, so further discussion to the substitute motion. Member Green?
Yeah, I think I just share the same sentiments as far as even in my own wheelhouse and personal experience, there is a deficit that seems to continue to grow as far as the academic nature that exists in our schools. SEL lessons that are 45 minutes that I've sat through in the classroom, yoga sessions 1 to 2 times a week outside of instructional time, add PE time, recess, lunch, sidetracks. I mean, we're whittling instructional academic time down very quickly. So 1 of 2 options. I would say we keep the standard that there is an academic expectation of instruction, or we decide that there are limits on the timing of these other things, which I think would bring us back. I would really love to have that, listed out so we understood how much instructional time is actually being given towards academic purposes.
So is that in the nature of an amendment or a suggestion for future exploration and possible activity?
Well, I
Or
think
just
it's
to the
in,
committee?
it's in support of that the board Where are we at right
Send
now?
back to the committee. So,
Back
yeah,
to committee.
pending is
It seems
back to
that there would
committee.
be some more quality checks that I think would prove fruitful as far as this debate around a child, their learning time, as stated, like in Iron County School District statement. Because I would have discussion even with that statement and what the quality checks on academic instruction time looks like. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? Seeing none, the motion, Vice Chair Earl?
I just want to clarify, what I'm hearing is that you're wanting to make sure that there's a spelled out time for certain academics, so that other things don't come in and crouch the academics versus considering everything educational services, and those educational services could be anything, and so therefore we're considering that part of academics. Does that, in a circle, is that what you're saying? Okay.
I'll just briefly say, I agree with that sentiment. I guess, in my view, what we're doing here is requiring a certain number of hours, and I would be hesitant to be more prescriptive in what those hours have to be, but I understand the sentiment of you know, at what level and in what forum do you kind of help focus on academic hours? I'm not sure it's here because I don't know that we want to be more prescriptive, but that's my reason for opposing it. But I do support the idea of looking at that balance. So anybody else? We got Member Bogus and, Chairman and Dixon.
Do it again.
I think that was a sign.
You'll have to press it
Oh,
again.
there we go. I think I got you.
Sorry.
Yeah, just having, thank you, Chair Moss, I'm reflecting back on what the rule used to look like, and Deputy Stallings can nod her head at me if I'm correct, but the rule used to be more descriptive, not necessarily prescriptive, but descriptive. And the board at the time, from feedback from LEAs, said this is limiting to some of the things we're trying to do, and so we became more general, leaving it to the locals to make that decision. So that would be a shift back then to more state control over that. I'm not saying right or wrong, just knowing that, just sharing the history that at one time it was more descriptive in nature, and the board said we want that left up to local LEA boards to make those determinations. And so going back to find out, I honor the request, I hear what you're saying, but just knowing that that would take a survey and a pretty massive undertaking by staff to get that information on your behalf from LEAs, because they would likely, in some cases, have to go school by school. So that would be all 140 plus of our LEA with a survey. So just want you to know the nature of where that data lies at this point. Having that, we don't have that information readily available. It would take surveying districts and charters. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Bogus, Straight, and Klein. I think all of you have spoken, right? So, Member Straight, did you speak to this one? Okay, let's go to Member Straight and then back to.
I really struggle with this and finding that right balance between our responsibility as a board and also the concept of local control. As I bounce this back and forth, I really do trust local school boards to do what's best for children. They're closest to their children, they're closest to their situation, and I think I'm going to err on the side of trust. And so I think we have a good recommendation before us, and I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, final comments. We've got Bogus. Oh, Hymus has not spoken to end. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Just briefly, I know the motion is to send back to committee. The committee voted unanimously to have this removed. If we're talking about what we're voting on, and then what we had voted on, or the original motion to strike the dates and just keep this going forward. If you want to send it back to committee, that's fine with me. but there's still no amendments and there's no action to be taken. So it would probably just come back as is. So my recommendation is then to vote for the lines. If you like the lines removed, let's vote yes on it and let's move on. And then 3 members of the board can reach out to leadership and say, hey, we want to bring this rule back, just like in the process. Here's our recommendations. Here's our amendments. Put them before the committee. Let staff work on them. And then we can follow the process. I don't think that's going to happen today, and I don't think it's going to happen by just sending it back to committee.
Thank you, Chair Hymas. All right, briefly, Member Bogus and Member Klein and Member Green.
Thank you, sir. So so Chair Hymas, I want to clarify, you said it was unanimous, but in the accounting, I don't know what we call these things, the accounting, it said that Member Carey was opposed. And so I don't fully understand that. But I guess my question is, could we send it back to committee and then say what those hours can be used for or what they cannot be used for? I think that it's appropriate to say that these hours need to be used for core academics and define that English, math, because if we've got schools using up 45 minutes a day in yoga, that is concerning because that adds up over 180 days. And so I think it would be appropriate to amend this motion to refer to R277419 back to committee for clarifying language on what can be used in those hours so that the board is clear that we have an academic expectation of these 900 hours and these 100 and however many days.
So that's an amendment to the motion to amend, correct?
Yes.
That would be to send back to committee with instructions, but not specific language, correct?
Yeah, we just ask the committee to add clarifying language with what they can do.
Right, the motion doesn't specify what those criteria would be, just
Well,
that they should add criteria.
Yeah, so once again, I'm just trying to engage in the way that I've been instructed to engage. And once again, I'm being told I'm engaging wrong. So I just want the committee to do what they think is best and then bring it to the board for debate.
I was just seeking clarification. So you weren't going to add language to it here and then send it back. You're going to send it to the committee with instructions to focus on something, but without specifying exactly how this motion would tell them to do that, correct? It would tell them.
Yeah, I think that allowing them to have that debate would prove fruitful.
Got it.
Yes,
No,
sir, thank you.
Understood. All right, so this is a amendment to the substitute motion, which would, okay, do we have it up there to make sure we got a, okay, so does that frame it up accurately? We can see if we have a second.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second? Second? Okay, any further discussion of the motion? Member Klein, so now we're going to the amendment to the substitute. Member Klein? Oops.
To Superintendent Dixon's comment about having to send out a survey, I don't think that that's necessary for us to put parameters on or be very clear about, of those 990 hours, how many of those we expect to be used for academic instruction. And I think that that's our job, to set that standard. And then the LEAs can work within that to determine how best to accomplish that. But I think it's important that we do not water down. I mean, our proficiency scores are in the toilet throughout the state when it comes to academic core standards, or not standards, but academic proficiency. And if we truly care about students being successful in those things that parents see as the purpose for sending their children to school, then we need to make sure that that is the priority when it comes to how instruction time, or those 990 hours, are being used, so that they are not being just wasted with all kinds of other things that may seem important and good in their own right, but they are not the purpose of why parents are sending their kids to school.
Okay, thank you. Member Green.
Yes, thank you. And I do support this because I do feel like it is our job to maintain the question, why do we send our kids to school? I think it's only fair that there are quality checks and expectations. If you're a fly on the wall and you listen to children and what a school day might look for them, I fear that we're hearing more and more that there is a lesson given, that a lot of that time is then spent on to work independently on their computers, which oftentimes I'm hearing is TikTok and Google it and Surface and, history classes that aren't even pulling books off the shelves to do their history lessons. I envision a school with rigorous academics, and with that comes high expectations, and I think that expectation begins with us. So I would love to see this conversation furthered because I want to see Utah succeed. And right now, I'm advocating for the students that don't need SEL, they need academics. They need time with their teacher. They need to see words written up on the board so they know how to write. They need the math problem done 50 times so they can do it once on their own at home. They need to know history so they know where they come from. All of these are the reasons we send our children to school. And for that, I do see that this would be a proper and appropriate quality check. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further lights, the motion then is motion to amend the substitute motion. And so that would add to Member Klein's substitute, referring it to committee, the language to clarify what an LEA may or must do to qualify for the funding for the minimum days hours. All in favor by show of hands? Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for that one. Yeah. All opposed? Fails 9-6, I believe. Correct? Okay, so we go back to the underlying substitute motion, which is that the board refer R277-419 back to committee. Seeing no lights, all in favor, please raise your hands. Sending back to committee. Unamended with 3 in favor, Klein, Green, Bogus, and Earl, and Carey, 5. Carey and Earl. All opposed? Okay, that substitute motion fails, which brings us back to the underlying initial motion that the board approve R277-419, pupil accounting draft 1 on second and final reading. Member Davis, discussion of that motion? Video.
I just want to add some clarity to my vote really quickly. Look, I have been all over the board on this, and I originally started absolutely supporting keeping these 990 in hours and 180 days. And a part of me still feels that they're really important, but the other part of me has said, we had so many new opportunities during the last few years that were unexpected, and LEAs have used the flexibility responsibly, and they have done it in ways that it helps support the teaching and learning in the school, and so I'm really hard pressed at this point now to say, well, we can't trust you with that flexibility because they have done some pretty incredible things. So this is one of those cases where you're like, oh, but in seeing what has been done, I'm willing to move forward and support the motion.
Okay, Member Lear.
I would very much second what Member Davis just said and say I have also been one of those that was saying we need to preserve the hours, the instructional time, the days. But I don't want to just repeat what Cindy said, but I also believe over the time that I have been involved in discussions with this, which is more like 20 years at least, we've also seen great changes in technology. And that has made a significant difference, not just practices, but literal changes in technology with different ways to teach and process. And I reluctantly give up on these days and hours. It doesn't mean for 1 second that I won't be focused on looking at instructional time. But what I've also come to believe is that LEAs are, we can't look in detail at the practices of 180 LEAs, maybe 41 years ago, but we can't. And so it necessitates, I think, trust and the communication that we do believe that they also believe in instructional time. And we would rather spend time, have them do that than with phone calls to the USBE that say, if we have a recess that involves instructing students in games, is that instructional time? That is a waste of everyone's time. So I think we just have to look to LEAs to say they also believe in instructional time. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Straight and then Superintendent Dixon.
Yes, and once again, ditto on for Board Member Davis and Board Member Lair. I too have struggled with this, as I've already stated. Don't need to rehash that. I know each of the board members or all the board members in the area that I represent, and I absolutely know and trust in their desire to bring about the best education. And when it really gets down to it, drills down all the way down to our educators in the classroom each and every day. And so I've come kind of 360 on that, or 180. I'm not sure which number that is, but nonetheless, I truly support the efforts that our local LEAs are making on behalf of children.
Thank you. Superintendent Dixon?
Thank you, Chair Moss. I really support the concern about academic excellence. I mean, I appreciate working for and with a board who really supports academic excellence for all of our students. So we need to underscore everything with that. I just have to give a shout out to our elementary teachers and our PE teachers because, and Board Member Green, I'm pretty sure you'd agree with me on this. There's a lot of research about physical activity, how important that is for learning and growth, brain growth. And so we've seen in this overplay to try and cram in, more time for literacy or math for some schools to do away with recess. And Board Member Norton to your left can tell you how important that is to get recess in. And I think you were just saying, let's make sure we understand where that fits in the overall scope of the time. But PE is a core subject that we have standards for, and I would be remiss if I didn't shout out appreciation to our PE teachers and elementary teachers who teach PE because it is part of the core standards that you've all approved, and it's an important part of our programming. Thank you.
Okay. Member Norton? Or, let's see, Member Norton, then Green.
And as a teacher who has taught yoga in my classroom, I have to say that when you have 10-year-olds or 5-year-olds or 8-year-olds, and you're teaching something pretty intense like double-digit division, and you have them stressed to their max for 15 minutes, then sometimes we take a brain break. And we might do 2 yoga poses. And we take a couple of big breaths, and then we jump right back in and do another 15 or 20 minutes on that division problem. Likewise, it wasn't very long ago that as a faculty of teachers, we were discussing how the handwriting in our students was atrocious. And we brought in our district's occupational therapist, and he worked with us on what was happening. And we soon realized that a big portion of that is because in kindergarten and first grade, so many of those play activities, playing on sand tables, playing with blocks, etc., were being taken out of the curriculum so that it could be so strongly academic focused that kids weren't having an opportunity to develop those small motor skills. And so we have to be a little bit careful. And again, it gets back to trust. I frequently at January and February, fractions, hard division, those kinds of times, or long language arts writing sessions, we have to have some brain breaks. And as an educator, I trust that that experience that I have in what helps best kids learn best, and I trust my counterparts with the way that they outlined their day as well.
Thank you. Member Green.
Yes, I appreciate the feedback here around this subject as well, and definitely not vilifying PE or yoga. What I am saying is that it gets out of balance very quickly. I clocked time for a student, my own, about 1 to 2 hours of academic times. She is homeschooled. There was no reason for her to go because she was lagging so bad in academics. She's doing great. She's caught up 3 years in reading. I'm just saying, please, I beg you, for students who don't have the privilege of having their mother be a stay-at-home mom and take care of their children's academic needs, please, let's help those children that need those balances and checkpoints provided in the school system. Play obviously is absolutely age appropriate, especially K through 3. K through 3, you learn to read. 4th grade and up, you read to learn. And if we can maintain those quality checks, we're golden. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Earl.
Let me just clarify real quick. We're voting on the hours, right, and the days, right? Am I correct in that? Wait, it already failed that it's going back to, okay. Just a couple of things. I do think the flexibility is important in this day and age. We've used that flexibility in my house and others for just those purposes, the ability to be flexible in using credits and how those are counted. And I think this is a good direction to go. I do think we need additional dialogue, though, around what are the checkpoints or whatever, quality checkpoints, from using Board Member Green's terminology, to make sure that we're getting the instruction in that needs to be there. So I think there's probably board members that would be interested in bringing this back. I do think the flexibility is necessary, and that's what this, unless I'm misunderstanding this amendment, that's the direction that's headed, so.
Okay, seeing no others, and I expressed my feelings earlier, but I'm fully in support of this idea of emphasizing academics. The question is, at what point is that accountability? Is it top down or is it bottom up? And in this one, I'm in favor of forms of bottom up accountability that make sure that parents are aware and have opt-in capacity, and that's a different subject, but that's my only reason for voting for this bill as opposed to something else that's more prescriptive. But fully support the ideas that have been expressed. So let's see, anything final? Those are my thoughts, but let's vote. We are back to the underlying motion. The board approves R277-419 pupil accounting draft 1 on second and final reading. All opposed by the raise of hands, or favor, raise of hands. Sorry. All right, and all opposed, raise of hands. 1, 2, 3. We have Bogus, Green, and Klein. So that motion passes 12 to 3. Back to Chair Hymas.
Thank you. On to agenda item 4.5, R277-620, suicide prevention programs. The committee moves that the board continue and approve R277-620, suicide prevention programs, draft 2 on second and final reading.
Discussion of that motion. We've got member Bogus, member Klein, and member, or did you want to jump in first? Member, Vice Chair Earl had a.
I have a motion.
She's trying not to light it up because it throws off.
It sends it all out. I have a motion. I think I sent it to Elise. Does Elise have, Elise Nui? So just in this particular program, my motion would be to add. Oh, is this draft 3? Okay, it's draft 3. My motion would be, so it would be a substitute motion, would be to adopt draft 3. And I need a second.
Second.
Okay, and I'll just speak to this. In the code itself, it spells out what needs to be addressed with, who am I looking at? Government and community agencies. It actually spells that out in code. So I've put in here, consistent with 53G 9702 2 is where it references that, striking lines 44 through 48, and then also the reference to definitions for ACEs, childhood experiences study up above. Those may be used, possibly, but I do think that drawing it out specifically in here is not necessary. And there's also a lot of misapplication of ACEs currently. I think I sent you guys the research, but or some information about that. I just think that we need to go back to what's consistently in the code and what we're asked to do. This is not a class. This is a program or a part. We're back to a part of the day, so it needs to be concise about the research we know. If this doesn't pass, I would recommend it went back to committee, and I would have some recommendations for that, because there's some things I would like added into then if we're going to add in specific things. But I won't address those now. Just if this doesn't pass, then I would make a motion to add some other things in.
Okay, Member Klein. Wait, did we get a second on that motion? Okay, Member Klein.
I would make a substitute, we already do have a substitute motion. I guess I will wait. I will say that I'm not okay with including all grades as this does. I don't know if this is, I have not had a time to take a close look at Member Earl's draft. Does it include all grades?
The code.
The code.
I could probably address that. The law includes all grades. It spells out specifically for what grades what's to be covered, and I could look that up if you would like that.
I can do that. So I will wait.
Okay.
Member Bogus, and then Member Lair.
Thank you, sir. So I have two questions. One I sent and didn't get a response to, and the second one is here. One is, where is the data that says training kids like this is good? I've never seen any studies that says this is good for kids and this is why. And so I'm curious as to whether or not we have that and whether or not it exists. And then secondly, the question I have is, my understanding is that we're supposed to be framing this in a life-affirming way, not in a prevention way. And I'm wondering if I have misaligned that with this, or if that is another rule that I need to be looking at. Thank you.
I understand Kathy Davis might have information. I'm seeing nods. Don't mean to jump on you, but if you're available, thank you.
Good afternoon. Kathy Davis, Suicide Prevention Specialist for the Utah State Board of Education, and here to answer your questions.
So, did you catch Member Bogus's question, or do you want to repeat that?
Yes, would you mind, Board Member
Kathy?
Bogus?
Thank you, ma'am. So my first question is, where's the data that says having these conversations with kids is actually good for them? Like it's increases their quality of life, makes them happier people. Where's the data that says it's good for them to be engaged in this kind of training? And in my mind, in particular, I'm thinking pre-K 8 even. Kids without the capacity for cognitive dissonance. Does that make sense to you? Okay.
So
Yes.
Kathy, that's a very broad topic. We could spend hours. It's probably not going to be an opportunity to hear all of that before we vote, but if you could point the right direction, that would be great. Vice Cheryl?
I might be able to answer that. If you actually look in the law, and so under 2, it says for elementary grades and secondary grades, so elementary has A, and it's the life-affirming education, including the concepts of resiliency, healthy habits of self-care, problem-solving, and conflict resolution. B, methods of strengthening the family, or 1, 2, 3, however you want to term it. and methods of strengthening the youth relationship in school and community. So that is what should be in elementary. Am I accurate in saying that? That's elementary. So that's not, and that is suicide prevention, if you want to term it that. It's actually just healthy children, right? But then in the upper grades, you would add that and then the lower piece. Am I articulating that accurately? Yes. Okay, and I don't know if you want to add any more to that. So there's two components. The one is not, the secondary piece is not taught in elementary school. And I don't know if that answers your question or not, Board Member Bogus, but maybe that provides some clarity, maybe?
Go ahead, Member Bogus.
I don't see in this rule, like, whenever I go to associated code, I always go to like the first 3 lines right before the definitions. And in this one, I don't see those code links. And so even in your draft, I'm still looking at in a space and place, and maybe I'm in the wrong place. I'm on draft 3. It says Board Member Earl at the top. And so maybe, dare I say, we need to move to send this back to committee so we have those appropriate code links so everyone is on the same page. And I would love to see the title of it even be amended to life affirming. I think that when we talk about the goodness and the hope that we have, we get a lot farther than when we focus on other things. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have bold conversations that are a reality, but I do think that if it's life affirming in code, it should be life affirming in rule.
Okay, further discussion, Member Lear. Let's see.
Yes, I had a question also for Kathy Davis, who's been a specialist in this area very productively and effectively for 15 years. I think I've got the number right. I would like her response to these proposed changes in draft 3 to see if that's something that she feels like maybe the staff overlooked or didn't read it the same way, or if she feels like there's an important reason for staying with the language we had previously.
Kathy, do you have access to draft 3 that you could address? We may be doing this on the fly, and please let us know. If you do have input on these specific changes, that we'd love to hear from you, but if it's not something you've had a chance to look at, I think we're looking on lines 42 to 48
She's the suicide prevention specialist.
and 18 to 20.
Well, they're coordinators and specialists, and so it may have been her boss, but she would have consulted with.
It's not on yet?
There
Okay,
we go.
Kathy Davis. And most people just call me Kathy Davis like it's all one word, so. Anyway, and I appreciate, and it's actually 10 years that I've been doing this, and I have been working my way out of a job for the past decade, and I really want to absolutely applaud Vice Chair Earl, because this language that she drafted for elementary, and we noted that we were seeing that our kids, we have to meet our kids where they are, and solving problems academically was one thing, but solving an emotional problem was quite another thing. And when I talk about that, I talk about emotional problem solving. Like, how do I calm myself down? I'm highly, highly anxious. How do I get through this next moment? And so part of that is a real life-affirming education skill. It's something that we teach our kids all the time. This is a breathing exercise. If you do this before your test, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna cope ahead. And so to your question regards to the, I am fine with striking lines 44 through 48, because if you look to the code 53G-9-702, it really encompasses everything that we're trying to do. Because essentially, if you're driving this car of suicide prevention, looking through the rearview mirror, those are all the suicides. But I look through the windshield, and that is a windshield of hope for all the great work that we're doing collectively, because it's every one of us that are going to prevent new suicides.
So in the short
Thank you.
version, if
Yeah.
I can.
Yes.
Yeah,
The
I'm
short
fine with
version
it.
is you're fine with them. Thank you.
Absolutely. But I just need it as kind of like the Academy Awards. I just wanted to tell you how grateful I am that you're able to help me out on this, because this is great. And I appreciate all your efforts.
And I thank you for your expertise.
You bet.
All right, Member Klein. Thank you, Kathy.
So for the younger grades, do they actually talk about suicide? But the way it's written, does it prohibit them from talking about suicide?
Sorry, Kathy. Welcome back.
Okay, once again, in the elementary grades, it's really a matter of teaching kids how to be more resilient, how to bounce back when they have issues with peers, how to do that conflict resolution. It's really essentially what we are doing with the Botvin's life skills, because you'll notice in this rule, what we're really doing is we are braiding all of the prevention programs together, because we realize that suicide prevention also encompasses how we're addressing our bullying prevention, how we're addressing our substance use prevention, and all of that. So it's really a life skills view.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember hearing you answer the question. Do they talk about suicide with the younger children?
Okay, if a student is suicidal even at the lower grades, part of the law says that any school employee may ask a student if they are suicidal with the express notification pursuit. Yeah, with notification that parent will be notified immediately, and then that parent will be able to address the concerns, the mental health.
But in the universal tier of teaching prevention, is it discussed with students
Is
in
not
general?
No, not discussed, because what we've noticed that with some of our evidence-based programs, such as QPR, question, persuade, refer, we don't really start doing that until about age 14.
Okay, and you mentioned Botvin Life Skills. That's basically a social emotional learning program. So is this just another way to bring in social emotional learning?
Kathy or somebody else, Superintendent Dixon, I think you can frame that as I'm not sure if it's an argument or a question. Seems like an argument.
I'm questioning.
Argument to the motion.
I'm asking, is this just more SEL?
It's a pretty broad question. I don't know if there's a way to answer that as a question, or is it a rhetorical
Yes or
question?
no? It's just a
Well,
yes or no.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something you can answer yes or no, but if you'd cared to speak on it, I'm seeing shaking heads, so let's take that as a rhetorical question.
Well, I've studied Botvin Life Skills. There,
Yeah.
I've gone to it's a social emotional learning program. I'm just asking for confirmation.
You're interested in answering yes or no?
They
but
don't want to, because it says, why would they not want to answer?
I think
Is
it's
it
too
just-
broad, and so I think it's a valid rhetorical point. It's just not a fact
No, I'm just
question they can
asking
answer.
them to confirm that it is in fact.
It's a health promotion program. It's health promotion.
And
That's
it's
how
about
it's labeled.
Emotions like she was talking about. So
It's a
just
health
want to
If
make that
there's
clear.
Member
I'm
Klein,
against.
Okay, if there's a specific factual question, I think they're happy to answer. I think there's a broader rhetorical discussion that's also appropriate, but maybe not so easily answered as a question about the program itself, including whether it's SEL or something else. But other questions or comments? I think we've gone through all the lights. Okay. The motion is that from Vice Chair Earl. Yes, Member Klein?
One last question. Are they prohibited from teaching about suicide to the younger ages?
I think it's been, that is more of a answerable factual question, but I think the answer
They're not
is no. Is
prohibited,
that,
meaning they can.
If it's an individual and they are suicidal.
Well, but I'm talking
You're talking about teaching.
teaching. When they're teaching life-affirming prevention programs, are they prohibited at the younger ages from teaching about suicide specifically?
that's a tighter factual question. Is anybody able to answer that one? Not a specific, go ahead, Deputy Stallings.
just wait. There's no language that we are aware of that explicitly prohibits LEAs from teaching about suicide prevention explicitly in the lower grades.
Okay.
But there's no language, that's the point.
This rule doesn't address it, require it, et cetera,
it's not,
right? That
yeah.
doesn't prohibit, okay. All right, the motion before the board body is, Member Bogus. Oh, and Member Davis, sorry.
Sorry, thank you, sir.
Lights
So, Ms. Davis, yes? Did I get your name right? I'm gonna celebrate. My question is, in the code, and maybe you don't know this off the top of your head, but in the code, is there an explicit opt-out for parents in this? I have a text message came in that says, is there an explicit opt-out? I know they can opt out under 205. That's not my question. My question is, do they have to notify parents, and is there an explicit opt-out offered in that notification?
So, Member Bogus, I'm going to field that and just direct us back to following the flow through the chair and then putting it out to staff if they're interested in answering it. So, is that something that somebody would like to volunteer to answer? Sure. We've just started trying to follow it better. It's always been there. We've gotten it a little bit more of a free flow. So we're going to bring it back to bringing it through the chair and then directing it out to staff. There's also, I think, a procedural. Sorry?
Notice?
This is it.
All right, but
On
what
the
I'm
record.
saying is, I tried
Here's the
genuinely,
notice.
I diligently tried to engage as I am instructed.
Yeah, fair enough. And
And
we're,
so
I think
I'm
Sid-
following instructions, and now I'm being reprimanded for doing what I was told to do, which is, it's kind of abusive at its core.
I think we're just trying to redirect, and I think some members have been doing that, directing to the chair. I was actually caught off guard because as we're trying to do it better, I thought the question was to me, and the intent was to follow the rules and then put it back out to staff. There's also been among staff leadership a discussion about making this process run a little bit differently, so we're also reacting to that. Maybe Superintendent Dixon wants to address that, but I don't mean to reprimand. We're just trying to bring it in line with efficient flow and avoid a back and forth that's direct between
Yeah.
members and staff. And so that's a more
just would like
formal way. and
clarity.
So we're trying to get there. Yeah, we're trying to do that. we're stumbling towards it, but that's kind of the normal process, and we're trying to be better about it. Superintendent Dixon. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, Member Bogus, I'll own a lot of this. We talked about it in leadership during a meeting I had. We talked about it in superintendency. We did not do our part to clarify with the full board, with staff. So we're trying to follow the process that board members in protocol speak through the chair, and the same thing in calling on staff so that it doesn't get caught in staff feeling put on the spot of a back and forth about a variety of issues. They come prepared to really talk to the motions that have been prepared, the things you've asked them to come prepared for. Doesn't mean that they're not knowledgeable and willing to engage, but what has happened in the past is a lot of back and forth, putting staff on the spot, and we've got members of staff who all of our staff want to be helpful to you and support you all, but they also feel very uncomfortable that they're speaking on behalf of the board or the staff when they come up to the front and they're asked a lot of things about a lot of subjects. So trying to redirect, just like you do as board members when you're asking a question to the chair, trying to do that the same when you're directing something to staff. And I will own it, I should have done a better job of making sure that everyone in the system was aware that would be going on today. So I'll just own it. So I apologize.
And I'll try to make sure I facilitate it. That's the job of the chair, is to facilitate passing it through to the right people to answer the questions. So I think it's just an effort to get back to the normal flow. I don't see any other. No, I see Member Davis. Excuse me. And then I'm sorry. We got diverted on process. The question, could you ask it again, and we'll see if somebody here is who's able to answer it. Just direct it to the chair and we'll throw it out there.
Could you remind me of my question? Just give me 2 words and I'll formulate it in my brain.
Oh,
Oh,
Kelsey's got
yes.
it.
So, Chair, when the notification goes out, does it include an explicit assertion that parents are allowed to opt out and a form with which to do so?
Do we have staff that's able to answer that? Deputy
We're going
Stallings?
to tag team on the answer.
All right,
So
Deputy
first,
Stallings.
there is no explicit language about opt-in or opt-out in the code related to suicide prevention programs. However, Kathy was just reminding me that if suicide prevention is part of a health course, there is an opportunity to opt out there.
Sure.
Briefly, so then, my understanding of the code, we read a lot, so I love that Superintendent Stallings is like, I wish I could just clone her brain. But my understanding was that you have to issue notice to parents that this instruction is going to happen. Am I incorrect in that understanding?
Deputy Stallings, is that?
No, I'm not aware.
Neither of us see that anywhere in the code.
Okay, I'll send you an email. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Member Davis.
Chair, I will try to be better as well. It gets hard because you get used to conversing. Chair, I'll speak to the motion of draft 3 and support draft 3. And I would also just like to add that we get in the logistics of policy here and kind of forget about, sometimes I do at least, like the real difficulties that our LEAs face dealing with these specific situations. And as a person who has been mistaken for Kathy Davis many times since coming here, I can say that our schools are really grateful for her and the work that she does. And she comes on the back end of these really heartbreaking times. But I just want to personally thank you and your staff for trying to do some work on the front end to mitigate those awful times for schools and teachers and families and all those who are involved. So thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Stallings, did you need to address something?
Thank you. I needed to correct the record on one thing, and then I think I know where Board Member Boggess's question about notification is coming. So first, I apologize. There is not an opt-out in health, only for sex ed, not related to suicide prevention or discussions related to suicide. The notification provision that I think you might be referring to, and it is in it does make a nod to it in 53G 9702, which is the section of code that relates to suicide prevention programs. In there, it does state that the program policies do need to include a provision that ensures that a school district or charter school promptly communicates with a parent or guardian of a student in accordance with 53G 9604. That section talks about, as Kathy Davis stated, if a student is threatening suicide, that there is a provision in there that the LEAs do need to notify parents of their students' feelings and potential threat of suicide. That communication is required in all grades, and that's what Kathy mentioned. That's it.
Okay. Member Carey.
Just, I just wanted to echo kind of what Board Member Davis said. I know when this came up in our Law and Licensing Committee, we spent a lot of time because I think this topic deserved it. And we had a great exchange in terms of their willingness to accommodate our concerns and amend the language that was originally proposed to us. They agreed to include additional language about social media and the harms that can do along the path of suicide and the thoughts that these students have. But I will tell you that I went and I counted them. I think we had a total email exchange between myself, is it Elise Newey, and Kathy Davis, probably about 30 to 40 emails. And they have been very accommodating, very helpful, probably questioned why doesn't he get this? But thank you for your patience in that. And I think that exceptional work, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Make sure you put in for the overtime. Sorry. All of us. All of us. All right. Thank you, Member Carey. Any other comments? Seeing none? Okay, we have on the board Member Earl's substitute motion that the board continue and approve R277-620 Suicide Prevention Programs Draft 3 on second and final reading. Seeing no lights, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, all opposed? One opposed. Member Klein? Or Member Lear? Are you?
Just a clarifying question and maybe a procedural question. Not looking back at this, was this posted as a continuation only? Or was it posted as an amendment and a?
Looks like amendment and
Okay,
continuation.
thank you.
at least on the-
Just the way the motion went, it didn't sound like it was posted that way. Thank you.
Gotcha. Did you get your vote recorded? I wasn't sure if we got you right. You were a yes? Okay, got her yet. All right, I wasn't sure if.
So just, I know you know this, but it's 1 o'clock. I'm just wondering if we do
Yeah,
lunch and we may have to skip other things until later because of, we've got
Let's see, we got
commitments
DTL.
at USDB is here.
Hold on, let's talk about that off mic. You're hot mic'd again. I'm not, you are. It's very touchy. Trust me, it's very sensitive. All right, we are an hour over on lunch, so I'm getting requests to break for lunch. We are on agenda item number 5. We've got to go through 15. So I'm trying to move us along. It's a joint effort. Let's take a half hour. Or should we take a working lunch? Anybody object? No?
30 minutes.
Remember, Vice Chair Earl says recess and yoga on the back patio with lunch. We're on. We had what we thought were a couple times certains, but they are not ready. So we're going to go back to law and licensing and then come back to USDB and our superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chair Moss. I'm going to ask staff if somebody's going to be driving this. We are on agenda item 4.6, R277-922. This is the Digital Teaching and Learning Grant Program. The committee moves that the board approve R277-922, Digital Teaching and Learning Grant Program, Draft 1 on second and final reading.
Okay, any discussion to that? Member Klein?
Yes, I would just like to make a motion or to amend or a substitute motion to amend the rule, line 162.
I think that would just be an amendment to the motion, unless it's an
amendment to
entirely
the
different
motion.
beast. But, okay, so an amendment to the motion.
So it would be to, on line 162, strike the words "not required to" and replace with "prohibited from," and then adding an ing onto implementing. So it would read, an LEA is prohibited from implementing. And I don't have it up in front of me, but, so I need to pull it up so I can speak to it.
So we're on DTL, folks. Line 162.
Oh, digital teaching and learning, I was on the wrong one. Okay, come on, find me.
Yeah, it's for the digital teaching and
I
learning.
was on this set up.
So, is there a second?
Do we have it framed up so folks can see if they want to second it? We're on agenda item
162.
4.6, digital teaching and learning.
And then you would add an ing onto implementing to make it read correctly. So an LEA is prohibited from implementing. Implementing the program in kindergarten through grade 4.
Somehow your microphone got hit off, so can you hit the button again? Thank you.
Okay, so it would read, An LEA is prohibited from implementing the program in kindergarten through grade 4. This is the digital teaching and learning program. Instead of just not required to.
Okay, is that framed up accurately, Member Klein? Not required to implement and replaced with prohibited from implementing.
We don't have a second yet.
I'm waiting for a second, but I want to make
Yes,
sure folks
that's
know what
correct.
they're seconding. So if we got up there, okay, is there a second to what's framed up there?
I would second it, but I want to speak quickly.
You bet. First to the maker, and then if you want to defer to Member Bogus, you can.
I just think that our younger students need to be not being put on the technology and learning their academics through tangible ways, physical implements at that younger age. And currently it's written so that they can, LEAs can teach using the computers for those younger grades. And I don't believe that that is a healthy way for the younger children to learn. And so instead of just making it an option where LEAs aren't required to, I think it should be prohibited.
Okay. To Member Bogus and then Member Lear.
Thank you, sir. So I would echo and piggyback off what Member Klein said. I would just also point us to the research that says tech at these tender ages is just simply not good for kids. Warning after warning after warning, screen time is not good for their brains. It's not good for their learning. It's not good for how they learn how to learn. And I think that the data and research supports something like this. And so I would support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Bogus. Member Lear.
And I would say, this is a grant program to begin with, so an LEA can choose to participate or not. And then secondly, if the LEA, the entity closest to the students, feels like in their particular community this is not a good thing, that LEA would have the ability to do that. And I would not want to take away that discretion from LEAs making those choices for their children in their communities based on what they know.
Thank you. We've got Vice Chair Hart and Earl. Are you trying to line up?
Yeah,
And then to Member Wood.
Sometime.
Member Wood.
So I don't disagree, and in my own school, I discourage quite a bit of use of technology. However, if we are going to go down this path, I think it needs to be a project, because there are things required in rule and in procedure of the younger grades. Just one I dealt with this week. In as low as second grade, we have expectations for keyboarding, testing, different, I know districts use computers with smiley faces for their learning feedback. If we are going down this path, I think that we can't do it piecemeal, and it would have to be a concerted effort by a committee to identify all those places where there's an expectation that students are on the computer and change those rules as well. Because a change of this nature just makes a conflict and does not actually solve a problem, and would really mess up, because it's a grant, would really just put a whole wrench in it. I think that the idea of getting kids off computers is very noble and very understandable. And like I said, I'm working on that, but as an educator, I am finding many places where that conflicts with expectations set by this board. So if we wanted to go down that path, I suggest that we make and discuss some sort of mechanism to bring out all those places in rule, and then I think it's going to have to be it's not something we can do just one-off. I'm worried that it wouldn't have the intended effect. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, Member Wood and then Member Earl, Vice Chair Earl.
Thank you. I appreciate Vice Chair Hart's words because that was something I was going to ask about. Also, two things. One is, do we have grants in place already where they are using a K-4 model? And so would that require them to reapply, resubmit their plan? And also, how would this affect, I know we have a bunch of early literacy software that is required through SB and our ELL. So just some concerns. Actually really like this thought, but some concerns with the bigger picture of what's already in place and how could we implement it. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Earl.
Yeah, someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think this isn't just kids using computer programs or paying for licensure. I think it also incorporates a teacher's use of technology in the classroom, meaning smart boards or other technology, whether it's with like a microphone or whatever the teacher, audio or other usages of technology that make communication and other things effective. Am I accurate in saying that with these younger grades, or is it all just licensure and kids on computers? I don't know if there's, okay. So I'm getting a confirmation that that is correct. And that's how I understood it. I understood it as both, actually. Licensure for programming as well as the use of technologies that made the ability to teach and do grading and things like that easier. So unless someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, Member Klein.
I would, if it's okay with who seconded it, add to my motion to direct staff to research I'm trying to figure out how to say what you were saying. All of the areas that technology affects the K through 12 grades as far as policies and rule and statute, and so we can begin that process of
let's
kind
see what
of,
that
so we
looks
can
like.
study that and see what it would take.
So that's a pretty,
I said
pretty
K4.
broad. Yeah, I'm not sure that would.
So can we do the information request separate from my
I think that's,
original
that's
motion?
probably safe.
That's
Is
fine.
that
I'm good
something
with that.
Sybil? Yeah.
I was just thinking of K4 to begin with. Yeah.
So if that's a research question, is that brought to the board for direction or? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm not sure that's a motion to bring here, but something to bring there. So we can tee that up and then have this be the immediate motion for action by the board, right? Would be as phrased at the Board amend draft 1, line 162, to strike the words not required to implement and replace with prohibited from implementing. Does that capture it? And did we already have a second?
Yes, we did.
Okay, Member Bogus. So, all right, and we did have some discussion, and then we came back. Any further discussion of that motion? Seeing none. All right, the motion is then Member Klein's motion to amend that the Board amend draft 1, line 162, to strike the words not required to implement and replace with prohibited from implementing. All in favor, raise your hands. Have 3. Bogus, Green, Klein. I believe they get everybody. All opposed? So 12-3. That motion to amend, 11-3. Okay.
And then Board Member Klein, we'll just put that in the queue for them and so
That's already in there, okay. All right, so we're back to the board, the underlying motion. The board approve R277-922 Digital Teaching and Learning Grant Program Draft 1 on second and final reading. All in favor, show of hand. Oh, sorry, Member Klein.
Sorry, I just had a question about the Utah Master Plan Essential Elements of Technology Powered Learning that was passed in 2015 and is incorporated by reference in this rule. Is that's just a plan? Is that required by code? Or is that something that we can amend as potentially based on this information request?
Is there someone who would like to field that? I see microphones moving, but I'm not sure. Deputy Stallings?
Yes,
Wanna take that?
so the master plan is referred to in 53F to 510. It does state that the state board shall establish a task force to create a plan, and that master plan says the state board shall develop a master plan, including the following. So it is in code, but Board Member Klein, your observation that it is from 2015, it is a plan that I don't believe has been updated since 2015. It was a whole process that a task force was created. We had some support from an outside agents group to help create that master plan at the time. So it is in code. We could request that it be stricken from the Digital Teaching and Learning Grant Program, but it is kind of a foundation of that program.
So follow up?
Sure.
So because it's incorporated, does that make it, is there force behind that? Do we have to implement it the way it is written unless we change it or strike it?
Deputy Stallings? You want that one? Okay.
You turn on a
Yeah,
mic.
there we go. So essentially, the Digital Teaching and Learning Grant Program requires LEAs to use the funds in accordance with that master plan. Now, does that mean the LEAs are implementing every single element of it? Not necessarily. Is there somebody else who'd like to speak? Yeah, so they do have to comply with that master plan.
Does that answer the question?
So I guess that would need to specifically be addressed with that information request, because we'll have to revisit that master plan.
Okay. All right, further discussion to the motion. Seeing none, I think we are back on the underlying motion that's bolded for us, right? So the motion is that the board approve R277-922 Digital Teaching and Learning Grant Program Draft 1 on second and final reading. All in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? I saw a couple. Just one opposed? Okay. 14-1. That motion fails or passes. Back to Chair Hyman. Just seeing if you're awake after lunch. I'm not. Go ahead, Chair Hymas.